Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about thirsty sword lesbians, and we're going to talk about the OSR, and we're going to talk about claiming victory. All right, let's jump into it. So, the West Coast Grognard actually did a video on how thirsty sword lesbians won a Nebula. Okay, that's a huge occurrence. The West Coast Grognard is 100% correct to call out that Thirsty Swords Lesbians winning a Nebula award is a major occurrence. It is absolutely a major occurrence. The biggest thing is it is the first indie tabletop role-playing game. It is one of the first indie tabletop role-playing games to claim a victory, to achieve something that Dungeons & Dragons is not. So a Nebula is a major science fiction award, but it's not in the tabletop role-playing game scene, right? So like your book, your tabletop role-playing game wins an Ennie. Who cares, right? And the reality is, and the reason why is the Ennies are really highly questionable at this point. I think most people realize that the Ennies are massively, in my humble opinion, most people do not really consider the Ennies to be anything but an indie tabletop role-playing game award. The reality is you can put D&D up there, but Dungeons & Dragons doesn't ever win anything, not because it doesn't have the best products, but because it wins so hard in the market that like the rest of the scene, the tabletop role-playing game scene, is like, hey, we really can't let D&D win all the awards too. They're already making all the money, right? Like, and so I don't think their Ennies really count. Like if your game wins an Ennie, who cares, right? Like, and there's a lot of discussion about how easy it is to kind of like take this action, take that action, and hey, now you have an Ennie. Okay, I guess that's impressive. I don't know, right? But the reality is, winning a Nebula is not easy. Every science fiction author in the world is trying to win one of those, and they've expanded the awards it gives out. And Thirsty Sword Lesbians won one for game design, and that means it beat out a whole bunch of other tabletop games, right? Maybe even, I don't even know if it's closed to, if it's open to video games, but it beat out products in other complete genres, right? Like in other product types, it beat them out and said, this tabletop role-playing game is better than this board game. Right, that's huge, right? Because those are all they all have game design, right? So this is huge. This is an accomplishment by April Kit Walsh for Thirsty Sword Lesbians, an indie tabletop role playing game that has never been done by D&D. That's big. That's really important and really big. Okay. Now here's the issue. As soon as April Kit Walsh won this victory, claimed this victory, right, for as a game designer, West Coast Grognard rolls in and says, this is a win for the OSR, and the OSR is not having trouble, because the OSR has been having a lot of trouble, and there's a lot of OSR commentators who are like, we're not in trouble. Look at this win for this OSR game. So OSR, Old School Renaissance, Old School Revival, is having massive issues. They're essentially having an identity crisis right now, and a lot of the OSR commentators are like, doesn't OSR even exist, right? There's even a question of if it's even a useful moniker anymore, right? And so West Coast Grognard is saying, hey, look at this OSR victory, right? What? Right? In what world is Thirsty Sword Lesbians an OSR game? So let's talk about this. Old School Renaissance, Old School Revival, right? First of all, Thirsty Sword Lesbians is a Powered by the Apocalypse game, right? That is completely narratively, it is massively narratively focused, okay? Unlike anything that was ever seen in 1980s D&D, right? Or in 1980s D&D, which the OSR is trying to emulate, right? So the reality is saying that this Powered by the Apocalypse, that's new indie tabletop role. So let's ask the question. What is Thirsty Sword Lesbian? I'm going to give you my humble opinion, right? It is clearly an indie tabletop role-playing game. It's not mainstream, right? That's D&D, and arguably there are no other mainstream tabletop role-playing games. It is certainly an indie tabletop role-playing game. It by no stretch of the wildest imagination qualifies as an OSR, an Old School Renaissance, or an Old School Revival. Its themes are certainly not OSR. Its game mechanics are massively not OSR. And to my knowledge, the April Kit Walsh, the author, has never identified as OSR or even allied with the OSR. Okay, the idea that Thirsty Sword Lesbians is an OSR game is ludicrous, in my humble opinion. Right, so this is a victory. The people who can claim this victory are people who are on the indie tabletop role-playing game bandwagon. That community, not the OSR community. They did nothing to support it. The OSR overall, in my humble opinion, did close to nothing to support this, and certainly didn't really give any innovation that's used in Thirsty Sword Lesbian. So the reality is, Thirsty Sword Lesbian has done something that has never been done in tabletop role-playing games, and that is to have won a game design award in a bracket that has nothing to do with tabletop role-playing games, and saying, hey, this thing is so transformative, so well built, so impressive that it's winning at the level of game design itself, not within its bracket, but in game design. It's beating out video games, it's beating out board games, it is beating out every other tabletop role-playing game, it's beating out storytelling games, all of those, right? It is truly impressive and has done something unique, right? So who gets to claim that victory? It ain't D&D, right? It certainly isn't OSR. It is the indie tabletop role-playing game scene. They are massively in competition with Dungeons & Dragons. They are massively in competition with the OSR. They need to beat them out because, people are literally trying to eat. It is like, you take a job as a TTRPG game designer, you're going to be having a hard time supporting your one mouth, let alone a family. I don't even know if you can, outside of D&D, as an indie tabletop role-playing game designer, I don't even know if you can feed a family. Legit. Right? I mean, if you got a body pillow, the body pillow ain't gonna eat, right? It's just you. And honestly, from everything I've been seeing, it's hard to make it even on one, right? So this is a huge accomplishment for April Kit Walsh. The community that gets to claim it is indie tabletop role-playing games. I don't think it's right for Dungeons & Dragons community to claim this victory, and I don't think it's right for OSR to claim this victory. Congratulations to you, indie tabletop role-playing community. You did something special, something unique, something truly magnificent. Not the OSR, not the D&D community, not the OSR community, not the D&D community. All that's my humble opinion. I'd love to hear your humble opinion. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.